Well, they look very different because while I was seeking for the historical truth in HHhH, now with the seventh function, I just chose to be much more playful with history and changing things, killing people who were not dead or things like that. So it may look very different, but in a way, I consider those two novels are two faces of the same problem, which is the complicated relationship between history and fiction, you know, from two different sides, from the side of history with HHhH and from the fiction side with the seventh function. What is similar is in both I show the problem, and I show that in fiction is different from history. I use different tools, but to face, I think, the same problem, which is the problem I like to be confronted with. I think today more than ever, he was a visionary, I think, because he understood that everything has a meaning, you know, and everything is talking. Before everybody, he could see signs everywhere, which was very clever and very efficient to read the world, you know. So he was very important for me because he taught me how to work, you know, as a French teacher, how to analyze text, and also how to understand the world beyond my work, my job as a teacher. He gave me really like a grid to read the world, you know. So he made me cleverer, more intelligent, you know. So I had a depth with him. And also, I thought, yeah, I mean, the circumstances of his death were funny in a way, you know, because he was crashed by a car. One day he had no keys, no ID with him, you know, so it was a bit of a mystery. He was coming from a lunch with François Mitterand, which is very funny because François Mitterand was always involved in strange things like that, you know. So I thought, well, maybe it could be the beginning of a novel, you know. I was happy to put that you know, that very academic science semiotic out of university, you know, and just to show, to pretend and to show, because I believe it's true. It can be useful, you know, in the in the real life, not only in the faculties and universities. And so, the move I did to make the book existing, you know, was to move the semiotics from university to the real world, and to use it as to decide that semiotic is the science of Sherlock Holmes, you know. Then I could write the book, you know. You can always make parallels, you know, and you could also make parallels with HHhH and the 30s. And one connection between my book and today would be that my book is about a change of an era, you know. I think, like, I liked to describe that misunderstanding, which was a very French misunderstanding, I think, in 80s, beginning of 80s, 81, François Mitterand was elected, and we thought it would be beginning of something, socialism, you know. And it was the opposite. In fact, it was the beginning of Reagan and Thatcher's era, you know. And I think now we are living the end of that era. We are still in that era of, you know, like the world shaped by Reagan and Thatcher, you know. I think now it's the final collapse of that world now. And so I think it's a way to, yeah, I mean, it makes my book quite, I mean, like, ringing with today in that way. I had to be very, very, very careful because I made very important, very intelligent people speaking, like I used Foucault, Deleuze, Derrida as characters, Umberto Eco. So if I wanted to be right, I had to be very careful with the way I was making them speaking, and so the best way I found was to use their own words, so a big part of my work was to read them a lot and to choose inside their own work and their own words, sentences or excerpts which could fit with my plot, So it was a kind of funny game of puzzling everything, like collecting quotes and moving them to my situation, to the situation of my plot. So it was big work, but it was fun, Basically, language has always been the most powerful weapon of the world, and I think truth and lies are very powerful weapons, both, So I mean, the winner is always the one who used the language the best. Whatever you choose between lies or truth, you win if you use the language the best. I met him because we've got the same publisher in France, so he organized dinner, so it was funny to have him live and to see him speaking and making jokes, and so of course it was very good material for me. I mean, and also I explained him what was my plan, and he laughed and he was very clever. So he immediately understood that, for instance, when I told him, what I would like is you as a character, you meet my detective characters searching for lost manuscript, and he understood immediately, and he told me, and your character will give me the ID of the name of the rose, So it was very nice. But then I sent him the book, and he didn't receive it first. Then I sent him again, and he died before he had the chance to read it. But he knew the project. Well, because I love it, I enjoy it as a reader. As a reader, I like when I feel the writer, the author talks to me straight, directly. Basically, I like a book being as a conversation, even a novel, so that's all.